Nottingham's classical architectural legacy, or what did the Greeks ever do for us?
The Romans left us the design for a triumphal arch in the shape of the war memorial on the banks of the Trent. The Normans perhaps provided the inspiration for this residential house, with mock arrow loops, matriculation and crenellation, and for this shell keep at Nottingham University. Watson Fothergill had his own take on mock Tudor, with just a hint of fortified battlements, while Pugin resurrected the Gothic at the Catholic Cathedral. But the Greeks gave us the Council House. Cecil Howitt designed this building for Nottingham City Council in the 1920s in a style known as Neo-Baroque. The facade is effectively a Roman public building modelled on a Greek temple and topped off with a Renaissance dome. The Greeks constructed their buildings with columns and lintels, but it took the Romans to develop the use of the arch. The council house displays both. There are 8 columns across the front, a design known as octo-style, with shafts and capitals in the form known as Ionic. The whole impression is one of proportion and symmetry. The columns are crowned by a triangular pediment adorned with sculpture. In Greek temples, these carvings would represent gods or the characters from the Greek myths. They would tell a story. Here, the pediment illustrates instead the story the council wanted to tell of its past, the present, and its hopes for the future. On the left are figures representing building and architecture. Architecture is holding in her hand a small model of the council building. Then comes education, labour, hygiene and child welfare. And in the centre, justice with 2 prisoners at her feet. On one side, a figure appeals for mercy, and on the other, a lawyer appears to be upholding the letter of the law. To the right stand literature and libraries, and beyond these, oxen and sheep representing agriculture, followed by painting and sculpture. Sculpture has a chisel in his hand and an unfinished alabaster carving, in tribute to the Nottingham carvers of the 13th and 14th century. And finally, in the far right, is music, represented by a reclining St. Cecilia. The facade is crowned by a dome inspired by that at the Naval College at Greenwich, which was designed by Sir Christopher Wren. The architectural commentator, Nicolaus Pevsner, disparagingly described the style of Nottingham's dome as Renaissance, spelt with a W. The building is entered, passing 2 Art Deco lions, very similar to 2 lions used to publicise the 1924 British exhibition, and then up the steps of the podium into an arcaded loggia. Above is a frieze illustrating Nottingham's industry: agriculture, bell founding, cloth weaving, lace manufacture and mining. Through the lobby, stairs are framed by Doric columns, which stand beneath a dome of coffer panels with a central oculus. Modelled on the Pantheon in Rome, built in 18 BC, the geometry of the dome again illustrates the Roman love of symmetry. If the arc of the dome is continued through 360 degrees, it would meet the floor level at the base of a perfect circle. In the ballroom, the Ionic columns are brightly painted, as the original temple columns in Greece would also have been. But the building is modern and innovative in other ways. It had an intriguing central vacuum system. Water sprinklers fed from tanks housed in between the 2 domes, and hidden electric lighting. The project had to be self-financing, a very modern concept, resulting in the addition of the Exchange Arcade, a development of shops to the rear of the building. The arcade is a beautiful space, with some of the atmosphere of a cathedral nave. Howitt's masterstroke was to give access for deliveries and storage via a lift down to an underground roadway. Why did the architect and Nottingham's aldermen choose a design based on the architecture of 2,000 years ago for their flagship building? By the 1920s, architecture had moved away from the Gothic and the classical, but instead how it played safe. He is quoted as saying that he did not want his design to become out of date. How many centuries does it take for out of date to become classical? The council, with its sense of civic pride, was perhaps looking for the safety offered by an essentially conservative style, driven by the uncertainties emerging in a rapidly changing society still recovering from the First World War. The Romans copied the Greeks because they were awed by their intellectual, philosophical and artistic achievements. The Greeks saw architecture as a means of serving the gods, and by contrast, the Romans believed that it should simply reflect the might and power of the builder and patron. Probably Nottingham Council felt much the same. Such is Nottingham's classical architectural legacy. Will societies in the 5th millennium, I wonder, look back to Nottingham's contemporary art gallery or the university's amenity building for their inspiration?